Hey, how you going, random strangers? As expected, this breakdown of season 2, episodes 3 and 4 is gonna be interesting. The core focus, of course, was on the brewing collision between Mizore and Nozomi that finally came to a head, and also, I think, just the general difficulty of making and maintaining human connection. We will also go into like a meta discussion around whether the dramatization in these episodes was a little bit too much, or whether it strayed from the more believable aspects of Hibike's depiction of high school band life. In short, there are good arguments for both sides, and I know that initially on my first rewatch, I was like, what? Why is this so dramatic? Why don't they just talk to each other? But then when I sat down and rewatched these two episodes and just focused more on the behavioral traits of each of the characters, particularly Mizore. Mizore was really interesting. I realized that there is a lot going on underneath the surface, and that the drama, though yes, it was very explosive, did do a great job in giving us deeper insights into actual struggles that high school students go through. Some of you raised some really important points in relation to Mizore about how she may have been written to represent someone on the autism spectrum, even though it's not explicitly said. And that, I feel, put a really important lens on the situation. And I learned a lot from, again, just really honing in on Mizore's interactions with the other characters from that perspective. And as if that wasn't enough, there were also some other provocative conversations in the comments to be had around what it means to play music with emotion, whether competition is good or bad, and what genuine friendship looks like. So here, I actually want to plant a first flag for Yuko, who I think has become one of the most likable characters on the show. And then there's Asuka. Why do I have a lot to say about Asuka? All right, episode 5 picked up at band camp. The students were going through some super intensive rehearsals, and that thing that they were doing where they tried playing their set pieces perfectly 10 times in a row, that is something that real life bands and orchestras do in real life. Although the most times that I ever did that with my high school orchestra was probably like 5 times. 10 sounds a little bit extreme, but also understandable given how badly they wanted to do well at Kansai. They even had that video camera up to pick out every single flaw from the audience's perspective. So yeah, this sort of musical marathon where the finish line is nothing short of perfection can be absolutely brutal. And of course, the only person not breaking a sweat was Asuka because she's a freaking machine. Speaking of machines, I really wanted to dissect the part where Hashimoto gave what I thought was constructive criticism to Mizore, but not presented in the best of ways. That was when he said that Mizore plays perfectly but lacks emotion and therefore sounds robotic. And in a word, she's very boring. So musically, he's on point. But if this was real life, I would totally disagree with how he did it in front of the entire band, especially since it seemed to be the first time that he gave this sort of feedback. And then even worse, he proceeded to compare Mizore to Reina and was like, hey, how about you just play like that trumpet girl? I think that just rubbed it in for no good reason and made an already uncomfortable moment even worse for Mizore and Reina. Some people might be like, oh, that's what bands are like. You know, toughen up. You're going to get called out in front of everyone and it's not personal. First, this isn't some kind of paid national orchestra where it's expected that you play at a certain level. This is a high school band with very young kids who are relatively early on in their musical journeys, some with very fragile self-esteems. So what happens, I think, normally is that at most an entire section is called out. And if there is a solo part that needs more individual instruction, you kind of pull aside that student and you work with them one-on-one. In the end, though, Hashimoto's criticism was also aimed generally at everyone in the band. So I just put it down to him, one, being characteristically bombastic and just generally a bit insensitive to what's appropriate or not. And we'll also see that trait later on when he basically outed Taki Sensei's trauma to some high school girl. i.e. Kumiko. And two, Hibike seems to really lean heavily into like the tough teacher, tough judge trope to the point where it is slightly unrealistic. But to reiterate, I did agree with the content of Hashimoto's criticism. You know, as a music teacher, I relate to having to urge students to inject emotion into their music. Perfect technique can only take you so far when expressing the essence of a piece of music. The emotion or the story that the composer wanted to convey through the music is ultimately carried by the player's own understanding of that underlying emotion. When he asked Mizoto what she wants to express and what she envisions as she plays her solo, that's something that I would ask my students. If you are playing a piece that is meant to evoke sadness or anger or joy, whatever the emotion is, it always helps to visualize images in your head to match that emotion. And I think the classic example here is Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Each concerto uses all of the instruments and in particular solos to convey these images of nature in order to give the listener a really strong sense or a vibe of each season. For example, Spring was written in this very happy key of E major. You know, the violins are very chirpy, which is meant to bring in mind birds, and the tempo accelerates as the piece goes on to depict a babbling brook. In Summer, for example, there is an adagio or like a very slow section represented by this gentle violin solo that's meant to make you think of a worker that's been out in the sun working hard all day and is just tired and buggered. And then suddenly you get these angry interjections from the rest of the orchestra, which represent this storm that's rolling in across the skies and getting ready to unleash their violence onto the world. Which then leads to my personal favorite part of this season, the presto or the fast section of Summer, when the storm finally breaks and it's just like rapid, angry playing. And what's cool is that Vivaldi wrote it so that the violin section is playing these rapidly downward moving notes, while the rest of the orchestra plays these notes that are rapidly moving up. So the contrast is what creates that image of a storm that's just very chaotic and crashing. So I used to blast Vivaldi's Summer Presto movement full speed when I was like driving down the highway. I just felt like a badass. Anyway, I totally went on this unrelated ramble, but the point is, music has evoked imagery for as long as it has been around. And so to fully convey the force of any piece of music, something more than just technical perfection is needed. It was so incredibly cute that Mizoto was so literal about the image that she was trying to convey through the music. You know, the song title is Crescent Moon, so of course she's picturing a crescent moon. And that's fine. What's important is that you are conscious of your function as a musician, which is to convey what it is that you're seeing in your mind as you play and feeling, so that the people listening to you can also see it and feel it. Anything is better than just a dry sound that's not driven by any sort of imagery or emotion at all. As you go from beginner to more advanced levels of playing, you can learn to emote through music, often by listening to just better players doing it. Some students are more naturally gifted than others, but conveying emotion isn't an innate talent that you have to be born with. It is definitely something that can be practiced. I did want to point out Yuko being a cinnamon roll throughout all of this, just comforting Mizoto and even trying to help her play with emotion. And I did feel for Mizoto and basically every music student who asks, but how do I play with emotion? Because it's not a question with an easy, straightforward answer. Yes, techniques like breathe harder here, or swell your notes here, or soften your tone here are the mechanics through which emotion is conveyed, but it is virtually impossible to make someone emote through their instrument unless they just naturally do all of those things themselves and then some. They also need to interpret the messages that the music or that is inherent in the music on their own terms. You know, put their own stamp onto it and just let it flow with genuine emotion. As a prime example, I actually want to pull up a clip from Lady Gaga that I think will display that point fully. I will find any excuse to play this piece of music, but this is Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga's But Beautiful duet, and just watch how she emotes through her instrument, her voice. There's like little breasts that she injects.
It's a heartache. But beautiful.
She plays with those notes so beautifully.
And I'm thinking,
okay, which I don't want to, but pause it here. Did you see how she phrases the lines to like rise and fall in just the right places to make you feel the intensity of the emotion that she is feeling? One of my favorite moments from that clip, when she sings I'd Never Let You Go. Yep. That slow down in the tempo before she sings that never, and she actually also accents the never, like she sits on that ne. Yeah, it's like that rubato was beautiful. You know, there was a real weight to it, and you can see she feels the weight of that emotion of never letting someone go that you love so much. It's all in her hand motions as well, and all of that translates through any kind of instrument. Does Lady Gaga possess incredibly technical vocal skill? Absolutely. Did she meticulously calculate every single rise and fall in her phrasing and her accents and think about it in a very mechanical, okay, I'm going to do this and then do this and then do this in her head as she's singing? Probably not. You know, there's going to be a little bit of planning, or you know, a fair amount of planning, because you sort of know the music inside out. But after that point, the best way that I can describe it is that your feelings flow through and fill out those mechanics, sort of in the same way that Geppetto, or was it Geppetto? I don't know. I think it's Geppetto in Pinocchio. He channeled life into Pinocchio and turned him into a real boy. You know, that's the difference between perfectly technical execution and then perfectly technical execution filled out with real human emotion. Can you practice conveying emotion the same way that you practice scales or some other technical skill? As I said before, yes, to a degree. You can listen to renditions of some great musicians and hear how they vary their tone and their dynamics and their phrasing, etc. And then you sort of record yourself and then you compare and tweak it a bit. But if that is all that you do, you basically just end up being a mime rather than coming up with any truly original or emotional interpretation of the music. You can use aids like stories or imagery. So, you know, sometimes you'll dive into the history of the piece and understand what messages the original composer wanted to express. Or like in Vivaldi's Four Seasons, you have these images in your head when you play the piece so that you can direct your playing. But at the end of the day, the process by which you convey emotion through music is somewhat indefinable. It can't be 100% reduced down to technique and mechanics. So yeah, Yuko did her best though. Like sometimes you just have to be like, okay, just stop. Don't think about it. Play just how you feel like playing. Because unsurprisingly, thinking about it too much often doesn't help. you end up doing the opposite of what you want. You know, you end up suffocating all of the life and the emotion out of the music. How would I describe Mizore's playing here, you know, at this part of the story where she's still drowning in her own feelings? It was flat, not pitch-wise flat, but tone-wise. And Wind players will have a better insight as how to explain this, but it really lacked a vibrato and importantly lacked expressive phrasing. And we talked about phrasing previously when we covered Reina's trumpet solo. It's the equivalent, just to refresh, of like the rise and fall of our sentences when we speak. Most people naturally don't talk like a robot or with periods spaced out every few words. Like there is a natural flow to the way we speak and how various tones indicate happiness or anger. So just like that, there is a natural flow to music and ways that we express different emotions through it. And that's what we term phrasing. So compare Mizore's playing here at the beginning to at the end of the episode where she had already reconciled with Nozomi. Her rich, warm tones were back, the emotive phrasing is back, and it genuinely sounded much more natural and beautiful than what she was doing before. Again, another reality hit. Like, in my opinion, the idea of someone being able to or unable to emote through their music because they were traumatized or incredibly sad about something, and then subsequently regained that ability to play beautifully with emotion because they resolved whatever mental block they had. That is more of like the stuff of TV and movie drama than like real life musicianship. In fact, I would argue that people who have experienced some sort of huge personal upheaval, or kind of like what I thought Misore was going to be like, who use music as an escape, even if it's like an unhealthy escape, they would tend to put more expression into their music. You know, music is often something that can soothe pain or can be a conduit for all of the emotions that you can't express verbally. So yeah, just, I mean, I liked how they used Mizore's inexpressiveness to show that she has a real emotional knot inside of her that she hasn't sorted out yet. But I find that in real life, the opposite is true. So when you have a knot that you can't untie yourself and you're just drowning in some kind of depression, your music tends to show that and it becomes more expressive. So Kumiko finally had that critical conversation with Asuka about why she refused to let Nozomi rejoin the band. Asuka was being her typical drama queen, joking about how Kumiko should never have promised Nozomi to get to the bottom of the matter because she won't be able to handle the truth. Here's my thought about Asuka. Her tendency to toy with people, even in serious situations like this, like when she dangled the answer in front of Kumiko and sort of egged her on to offer her own theories about why she made this decision, I think says a few things about her character. She uses irreverent humor to keep up this barrier between herself and others, to deflect from really letting them see what she really thinks or feels. However, it could also be that she uses humor as a coping mechanism. You know, making light of drama is easier than addressing these complex emotional dynamics directly. And there's also a third reason I think that she acts like this. Asuka seems to relish being this unpredictable, mysterious figure that people can't quite understand. So I think there is a little bit of an ego trip involved. She enjoys the bafflement that she inspires by being evasive and giving these cryptic non-answers. What that says to me is that despite Asuka's outward sophistication, there might also be a level of immaturity too in terms of her emotional unavailability and her being unable to handle these intense interpersonal problems with the appropriate care and gravity that they should demand. She projects this like absolute confidence, and yet deep down she's kind of very emotionally flimsy. That still makes her an interesting, fascinating character. And it wasn't really until this episode that I saw more cracks appear in her mask and really betray some deeper issues with like authentic expression and her lack of sincerity, especially when navigating complex human conflict. Asuka didn't refuse Nozomi because she is an excellent flute player and might disturb the balance that the band has found, which is sort of what Reina said and what I was previously thinking, but because Mizore suffered from some serious Nozomi-related trauma, even as Nozomi was totally unaware of it and thinks that they're still old childhood friends. We will unpack all the different levels of messiness in the Mizore-Nozomi affair later, but given all of that, Asuka made the not completely wrong calculation that preserving the sanity of the one and only oboe player, and by extension, preserving everyone else's dream to get to Kansai or do well at Kansai, was much more important than welcoming back Nozomi, even if it meant that Nozomi felt like she was being punished. I had guessed that that was Asuka's motivation last time, and I still think it was a mostly rational calculation. However, that does not mean that Asuka handled it well or in the best way that she could have, especially in her capacity as vice president and also the level of influence that she seems to have over Nozomi. It certainly wasn't the most emotionally mature and humane way of dealing with this sort of high school drama. The way Asuka put it back on Kumiko to decide whether she would tell Nozomi now that she knew the truth felt a little strange. It felt like Asuka was putting Kumiko on the spot to make this impossible choice. Like she was saying, now that you see how messy and complicated this situation is and how all of our competition hopes are at stake, would you really do anything different? Like, I made this tough goal to protect the band. Now that you have the power to drastically change things by telling Nozomi the truth, would you really mess everything up? If she almost dared Kumiko to tell Nozomi, as if to say, I know you want to fix this, but I also know that you won't be able to handle the full consequences. It was kind of this like strange power flex. Putting Kumiko on the spot reinforced her own position as a leader who makes tough calls and like the supposed correctness of her decision. In reality, there were a number of other ways that Asuka could have handled this very volatile situation between Mizore and Nozomi in a more like thoughtful and mature manner. Number one, like, you know, before exercising her royal decree to ban Nozomi, she could have at least communicated more with like Yuko and Natsuki and others like Kaori and Haruka too, to sort of get their perspectives and ideas, you know, put their heads together, think of something better. Like a more collaborative, less dictatory approach is always better when dealing with a sensitive issue that impacts a lot of people. Two, she could have like spoken directly and compassionately with Mizore first before taking any action. Getting the full context of her trauma directly from Mizore could have helped her come up with a better solution that both addressed Mizore's needs and also maybe could have found a better solution, you know, rather than protecting her or the band without her input. And look, if Mizore wasn't comfortable with speaking to Asuka, which she probably wouldn't be, she could have had Yuko there as a mediator. Three, she could have facilitated, I'm talking Asuka. Asuka could have facilitated an in-person discussion between Nozomi and Mizore to clear the air, to apologize and to sort of explain themselves. I mean, that's what ended up happening anyway. We saw in the end that like a face-to-face conversation was all it took to patch things up. And Asuka, given her position, could have mediated that conversation much earlier. Even if it was ultimately decided that Nozomi rejoining was too risky, Asuka could have like communicated that openly and like calmly to Nozomi and sort of made room for adjusting that decision later on, maybe if Mizore became more comfortable with the idea. In sum, Asuka could have demonstrated like much more emotional intelligence, like transparency, flexibility, more compassion and respect, basically, for everyone involved. She could have been a less reactive dictator, more of like a collaborative and patient problem solver. Instead, her trying to put like a tight lid on things contributed to exacerbating this ticking time bomb. She may like to think that she is above the drama and the petty concerns of her peers, but she really suffers from like a similar level of immaturity, just of a different flavor. Now, I know I'm talking about all of these things as if these kids have a level of adult emotional intelligence, which they don't, which is why I felt like rewatching these episodes, it recreated what it's like to be a high school kid trying to deal with all these big emotions. But Asuka, I felt like I could hold to a higher standard given how she's lauded it above everyone else, that she is so much better and so much above all of these emotional, explosive feelings. But at the end of the day, she too is also a high schooler who doesn't have quite the right tools yet to deal with this properly. The whole drama with Reina mustering the courage to ask Taki Sensei whether he was dating Niyama Sensei was very teeny, wholly expected though. They used that signature Kumi-Ray face squish to indicate that Kumiko was 100% supportive and is now the one pushing Reina to face her fears and to just get it done. What happened next though made me feel like a little bit more uncomfortable. I don't know. At the very least, I wasn't expecting this to be the way that we found out about Taki's past. Hashimoto kind of like self-inserting into the scene and very inappropriately exposing to a high school student the intimate details of Taki's dead wife. You'd think that the moment where he was like, oh crap, I've said too much, would be when he stops talking. But nope, he just went on to say like how depressed Taki became, which is completely understandable, and that it made him give up on music for a while. So this reveal was convenient narratively and fits with all of the hints that have been dropped about Taki's story. But my God, the wrongness and sort of the unbelievability of this personal information coming from a guest teacher, who, by the way, continues to make very bad jokes about how hot Taki Sensei is and how all the girls are thirsty for him. Oof, I don't know, man. Like, Hashimoto is clearly a great friend, but I give him like 0 out of 10 for personal judgment. Speaking of inappropriate intel sharing, we had Kumiko once again suffering from a severe lack of common sense as she pondered whether to tell Reina about Taki Sensei's trauma. Firstly, it is not her business to tell, but we've seen before how Kumiko also tends to self-insert into these high-tension situations that have nothing to do with her at the risk of making the situation worse, or at the very least not making anything better. And 2, probably because of, high school myopia than anything else, she treated Reina's crush on Taki as very serious to the point where she thought it would justify telling Reina about Taki's wife. I am so harsh on Kumiko, I'm sorry. Look, I feel like I should say this once and for all and then I won't have to repeat myself again. I do understand that these are high schoolers. But say what you will about Kumiko, she has this knack for stumbling into conversations that don't really concern her. And it got tense between Natsuki and Yuko as Natsuki demanded the reason for Nozomi not being allowed to rejoin band. And Yuko insisted that it was because the band would fall apart, but wouldn't say exactly why. This is where I really started to feel that Hibike betrays the frustration of high school drama and non-communication very, very well. Initially, as you know, I was like, why don't they just talk it out? Asuka, Yuko, and Natsuki, they should all work together to figure out how to tell Nozomi that Nizore suffers from PTSD and then figure out a way to get Nozomi and Nizore in the same room and then go from there. Communication, until I realized, yes, there are high schoolers whose brains haven't fully developed yet. Instead, what we got was like a really realistic compounding of these non-communicative decisions. Asuka not even considering using the communication trap card, but just making like a very Machiavellian choice to cut off Nozomi for the sake of preserving Nizore. And then Yuko refusing to tell Natsuki or seek her help out with this situation because she thought that Natsuki can't handle the truth. That sounds oddly familiar. Now, I'm not saying that Asuka and Yuko were acting irrationally. They both extrapolated what they knew of the situation and made these seemingly reasonable calls to protect different things. Reasonable, at least for high schoolers who haven't developed their conflict resolution skills all that much. So I do appreciate the believable layers of compounding non-communication that is typical of a bunch of high schoolers. Kumiko playing the role of shamefully eavesdropping, wall-crawling lichen was great. She is such an awkward dork. I also loved how this conversation between Kumiko and Yuko showed that Yuko is a lot more than the hot-headed mean girl that people often pin her as, especially after what we saw in season 1 with her horrible treatment of Reina and how impulsive she is, especially when she thinks that the people that she cares about are being threatened. So Kumiko is not wrong. She is a lot to handle. But Yuko turned out also to have more insight into her own reactions and her own behavior than she is given credit for. Sure, she will not take back her opinion that Kaori should have gotten that solo part over Reina, but at least she can acknowledge that she feels that way because, well, one, because she's madly in love with Kaori, and she feels like indebted to her for how she encouraged Yuko to stick with Van despite all of their difficulties. Kaori herself had every reason to be bitter, given how she was passed over in favor of these lazy seniors, but she persisted, so I can understand why Yuko respects her so much. But also, too, Yuko acknowledged the very human response to like any sort of competition, even fair ones. Reina won the solo fair and square, but the results still hurt because of how invested Yuko was in Kaori finally getting her dues. It was like the final year she could have gotten that solo, but she lost out. So Yuko, being a person whose empathy runs very deep, naturally felt bitter and heartbroken about it. She wanted to see Kaori succeed so bad that Kaori's disappointment became her own. Most of the time, everyone has worked hard and everyone are legit talented, but there are only so many prizes to go around. It is inherently a sad thing that only a small fraction of deserving musicians will get recognized. So even when competition outcomes are fair and merit-based, it can still be very difficult to accept the results, and I'm sure some of you know the feeling. Those who lose have likely also sacrificed just as much time and sweat and passion and hope into winning, so coming up short really stings, especially when your self-worth gets tangled up in your achievement. Performers, we invest parts of our identity into our skill. So being ranked lower than someone else, even if just by a hair split, can make you feel like as a person, you're not good enough. Even though the reality is that there's just a lot of talented people out there. It's a very irrational but a real emotional reaction to have when you lose. And it's, again, something that is completely understandable and something that I totally empathize with. So in the end, because auditions and competitions are essentially ways to figure out who falls where on a hierarchy, it does turn people's self-worth and their hopes and dreams into like a zero-sum game. This part where Yuko was spilling on how judges will sometimes write these snarky or downright mean comments on their evaluation sheets was like, what? Who runs these competitions? The Yakuza? I do not know any professional judges who would do that. Now, I'm not ruling out that there are some bad and some biased judges or even like a few nasty ones, but generally, at least in my experience, they're there to give honest feedback and make some very tough decisions rather than to put students down. And if they ever were that unprofessional, they probably wouldn't be judges in the next year. So is it better to not have competitions at all? Now imagine a world where that was the case. There would be no way for anyone to test their mettle or their skills against other talented and hardworking people. There's no extra incentive to work hard or improve yourself. And there is ultimately no satisfying validation of your efforts. Yes, competition can breed disappointment, but it is also an effective way to award merit. Like, in fact, entire countries' economic systems and the whole global world economy is based on some form of like capitalist free market principles to try and ensure that the best products or businesses win out. Even if those principles, let's face it, are often violated and free competition is not really a thing. But I digress. So on a micro level, contests incentivize individuals to work hard to develop their talents and distinguish themselves. The music world thrives on competitions to I guess, to benchmark skill and to filter out the most elite performers for like top orchestras and for solos. Their existence motivates a whole bunch of younger musicians to achieve more than what they might have otherwise. And since blind auditions became the norm, that has really pushed decision makers to focus objectively on talent above other biases. So while there is no system that is perfect, and like elevating one winner can sometimes feel at odds with music's more cooperative nature, I think well-structured competitions can and do celebrate diverse talents and help spur like growth across the board. I thought Yuko's breakdown of what competition means and why it is valid to feel bad when things don't go your way, even though you knew that the outcome was fair, was very insightful. It was honest and it was very relatable. When Kumiko asked Reina for her view on competitions, it was not surprising that we got this very black and white, all or nothing answer that I don't necessarily agree with, but that I also completely understand from a musician's perspective. Essentially, Reina thinks that it's usually easy to pick out who deserves to win. Talent speaks for itself, and those who complain about competition results are just sore losers. However, as someone who is naturally gifted and stands above her peers in terms of musical skill, I would say that it was very easy for Reina to say that she likes competition simply because she is in a relative position of privilege. Now, I don't mean privilege in the sense that Reina didn't do anything to deserve her solo or her standing in the band, because she absolutely does. She, like everyone else, practices hard and takes her music very seriously. I mean it more in the sense that even though Reina works hard, the natural talent that she was born with does make it easier for her to rise above her peers. In other words, at least one element of her success was due to pure luck. When you're also lucky enough to have the talent and parents with resources who let you learn music from a young age, plus you yourself persevere in practicing and in improving, success usually follows. But to those who may not have been born with that natural talent or the resources or some other like uncontrollable factor that stops them from achieving their full potential, for example, in Kaudi's case, it was an unfortunate situation where a merits-based system just came in too late for her. Then it's less black and white. It's much more difficult to say, oh, you're only upset about competition results because you're a sore loser. Like, it's never that simple. So while I think Reina is right in that competition is generally a good thing, she does overlook some legitimate challenges that other people may face that she doesn't. Her raw skill means that she has probably never had to face very close calls where the margin between winning and losing was like razor thin. When contests come down to these very tiny differences or like subjective taste, questioning the ultimate fairness of a competition can be a reasonable response. Also, what if someone was equally talented but was unfortunately was born with a tendency to have crippling stage fright? So what, a well-designed impartial system based on competition can still exacerbate these gaps in raw talent and opportunity and certain luck factors that are outside of an individual's control. So in the end, Reina's very singular confidence and status as a standout musician really colors her perspective. Competitions clearly have always affirmed her self-assessed talent. She discounts these more complex structural issues and can't really empathize with those who do have legitimate struggles with competitions. That's not just them being bitter and, jealous. Reina does tend to have this lack of nuance that is, again, also typical for a high schooler, but also typical for someone who has never had to deal with any real tough competition and he was just born to play the trumpet. Why was Kumiko going around asking everyone what they thought about competitions? It just shows that she has this personality that tends to want to know how others think so that she can then inform her own opinions. Unlike Reina, who has this very solo track mind and will stick to her guns even if the entire universe is against her, Kumiko is more susceptible to changing her mind based on what the people around her think. And I don't think that's necessarily a good or bad thing, although in some situations, not having a solid view of your own on something, especially for things that matter, can be problematic. It can also do some real damage, like if you're influenced by people who hold some very, very bad, wrong views. For example, when Kumiko's senpai told her that she was trash for taking out her competition spot, and Kumiko believed her and felt terrible about it for all those years. So it really depends on the opinions and the kinds of people that you are gauging opinions from. Why did Reina saying that she likes competitions comfort Kumiko? She sort of reacted with that little smile at the end of episode 4 too, when Reina matter-of-factly said without a second thought that she couldn't imagine playing her instrument for anyone else but herself. And Kumiko, likewise, was like suddenly overcome by this burst of joy. I think it's because Reina being unapologetically Reina is a huge boost for Kumiko's own confidence. Kumiko often second guesses herself and worries about what others think, so Reina's self-assurance and her lack of reference to what other people think acts as this like steadying, validating influence. Kumiko can cling to Reina's confidence when her own wavers. I think it alleviates Kumiko's fears that dedicating yourself completely to your instrument is a selfish thing to do. Reina's, her unapologetic pursuit of music for her own sake gives Kumiko courage to pursue her own passion for the youth without overthinking how others might perceive of that passion. That is what makes their relationship so solid. Reina voices convictions that Kumiko shares but is too timid to say out loud. Seeing Reina be so candid with her musical purpose makes those buried parts of Kumiko feel acceptable instead of something that she needs to hide. And I think on a more basic level, seeing someone fully leaning into their talent and potential naturally just makes you feel like you admire them and happy. So Reina really gives Kumiko permission to be herself, to fully lean into her passion for her music. I have many things to say about that last scene of F3 when Kumiko came across Asuka playing this melancholy song on her youth in the very early hours of the morning, where the sun is just high enough that it's light out, but still early enough that everything has this soft, ethereal glow to it. To me, and with no scientific basis whatsoever, just feels like the time of day where true, honest emotions are most likely to come out, especially when you're alone. You know, your guard isn't up yet or your filter hasn't had time to snap into place. And I like to think that one of the reasons why there were so many stylistic shots here, like that soft, dappled sunlight shining on Asuka, she played right in the middle of that lush field, these close-up shots of her fingers on the valve keys, and sort of this dramatic sweep of her hair down her back. I think the scene maybe was making the point that a lot of things that we communicate aren't communicated in words. Meanings and emotions can also be communicated wordlessly through imagery like this and through music. In a scene focusing on Asuka, that became even more significant because she rarely, if ever, expresses her true emotions without this layer of sarcasm or like an ulterior motive or some kind of consciously placed impenetrable barrier. But she does convey honest emotion through the playing of her youth. I mean, her playing, it was beautiful, incredibly rounded, smooth runs, and like Kumiko noted, it embodied a sense of mystery while also sounding like warm and just a bit sad. It was Asuka the most unfiltered she has ever been. And I love that they gave this honest musical moment to a character that is 99% of the time so cynical and unable to express herself directly, or at least is impossible for other characters and even like us, the viewers, to really understand. Okay, the explosiveness, that was episode 4. So we were 10 days out from the Kansai competition. Kumiko decided not to tell Nozomi about what she knows, and the band found out that they're the 16th band to play right after Myojo Technical, which I believe was the very talented band that was playing on Kumiko's TV. Midori stayed true to her inhumanly talented and optimistic self because while everyone else was really unsettled by having to play immediately after one of the faves to win, she had that excited glint in her eyes. One thing about competitions and the order in which your band appears that I remember from school is the overall order didn't really matter because when your band or your orchestra isn't playing, you're sort of hanging around another block somewhere, just chatting with your friends and trying not to get bored, just waiting for your turn. But the group that comes right before you, usually you're backstage listening to them, sort of ready with your instrument so that you can walk out as soon as they're done. And you get to hear how good or bad they are, which can work for or against you. Now, I'm assuming Myojo Technical will be amazing, which could work against Kataoji if they really psych themselves out with how good they are. So just play like you always do is sound advice, but unsurprisingly is a lot harder to put into practice when you're waiting backstage with sweaty palms and just a mountain of expectations on you. Plus, the group just before you is a top dog. As a former music teacher, I found this scene where Niyama Sensei apologized to Mizore for dismissing her talent super interesting. I thought it was a very gracious apology from a teacher who recognized that their initial judgment of a student was wrong and who both cares a lot about and is humble enough to admit that in order to encourage them to not only fulfill their true potential, but also to just enjoy the experience of playing music, which is equally important. Niyama Sensei didn't know what was really going on or why Mizore found it difficult to play expressively, but she was sensitive enough to know that it's not because Mizore isn't talented or teachable enough, that some emotional block probably is preventing her from really shining. So I highly appreciated Niyama Sensei's humility and her willingness to reconsider her initial judgment, because in real life, you can come across some excessively harsh music teachers who will dismiss someone's talent based on just a couple minutes of playing. Case in point, my violin teacher was this grumpy old drag-smoking Russian who would weed out potential students after just a few minutes of auditioning. He kind of assumed that he could sniff out someone's talent or lack of talent in a few minutes and then just judge whether they would be worth teaching. He was brilliant, by the way, like just full-on old-school Russian violinist who had played in the National Orchestra back home for like years and years and years. But also, I'm not sure in hindsight if that was the way to go about it. So props to Niyama Sensei for caring about Mizore's development and her emotional well-being. Like, it isn't just about skills, but also finding the joy in playing music. She also really, in a great way, encouraged Mizore's latent talent very gently rather than shitting on her for what she can't do yet. I think a sign of a great teacher is someone who builds their students up rather than criticizes them for their existing limitations and who helps remind them of the musical gifts that they do have. What's going on with Mamiko? Most things related to Mamiko stray into the realm of pure speculation, but I guess that she had another very typical and serious clash with her father over something, maybe not necessarily related to music, but nonetheless it revealed how she might have clashed with him over her love of music in the past. Maybe he was the one who laid down the law when music became this competing priority to her study. And it also explains why she came off so bitter at the start of the season. You know, you can't blame a teenager for having some not so pleasant memories if she was forced to do something that she wasn't passionate about for the sake of pleasing her parents. And again, just adding that additional Asian context, I would not be surprised if this clash caused some serious damage to their relationship and is just built on this expectation that you do what your parents tell you to do, especially when it relates to your future study and by corollary of that, your future career. We finally got to the core of the main drama. Nozomi had let go of the idea of helping Asuka out at the competition, although she hasn't given up on rejoining the band. But then she brought up Mizore, how surprised she was that she'd been told to express herself more, because in her memory, Mizore is someone who plays with passion, with emotions just exploding out of her. So she very casually told Kumiko that she'll just drop in and check on Mizore. I was confused and surprised by how Nozomi was completely unaware of how broken her relationship with Mizore was, because my impression up until that point was that they had had a falling out of some kind and had cut off all contact with each other as a result. Mizore felt betrayed by Nozomi for quitting the band and not keeping her promise of trying to go to nationals with her, while Nozomi might have felt overly guilty and just didn't know how to patch things up with her, so had avoided speaking to her for a very long time. At least the little bits and pieces that we got of the flashbacks in the previous episodes gave me that impression for some reason, and I was completely wrong. What happened next was like the setting off of a bomb that had Kumiko panicking, and that Nozomi walked into with her guard completely down, because it turned out she had no idea that Mizore would react the way that she did. She thought that she was just catching up with an old friend, and not a particularly close one either, which will turn out to be critical. Mizore's reaction, to say the least, was explosive, because down went the music stand and she just legged it out of there while having a panic attack. So let no one say that Mizore has no emotions. The fact that she showed such a violent reaction only goes to show how much and for how long she has repressed her emotions. Meanwhile, Nozomi got like some strong laser glares from Yuko, who was pissed for some pretty complex reasons. First, that Nozomi had no idea why Mizore was so upset, and second, that she really didn't do anything particularly blameworthy. Yuko knew that Mizore and Nozomi's relationship had been 99% one-sided. Nozomi, with her popularity and the fact that Mizore didn't or couldn't communicate her feelings, couldn't really have been expected to know just how deeply hurt Mizore had been by her quitting the band without telling her. So without something concrete to point at to say that Nozomi had done something to hurt Mizore, other than making some wrong assumptions about her, which we'll talk about later, I kind of get Yuko's frustration. Mizore was incredibly vulnerable, and as someone very protective of her, Yuko needed to lash out, except there was no straightforward villain narrative that could have easily explained Mizore's trauma. And that's not to say that Yuko's anger came from nowhere. It stemmed from feeling that Nozomi's lack of awareness itself feels like somewhat negligent. She didn't intentionally betray Mizore, but she failed to see the warning signs. Her very casual assumption that she and Mizore are just normal friends really downplayed like the immense one-sided significance of the relationship that Mizore had. So Yuko was, she was experiencing this very righteous indignation at a very complex situation with no real simple solution. A super insightful comment from the Sledgehammer made me think deeper about Mizore's experience of all this and why talking it out may not have been the straightforward option that it seems to be. So they wrote, the Nozomi-Mizore dynamic is typically what happens when an extreme introvert befriends an extreme extrovert befriends an extreme introvert. As the dialogue went, Nozomi was Mizore's only friend, which could explain why she may have felt obligated to perform only for Nozomi. There was nobody else in band who gave her that feeling of being wanted. It's the psychological equivalent of freeing an animal or a person who was chained up. Maybe not to such an extreme degree as I'm describing, but a psychological wall that an introvert might construct in their mind where they have social anxiety or some mild communication disorder of some sort. I find autistic people have this tendency, and was a carer for a young kid who was on the lower end of the spectrum, who was intelligent and gifted, but did not have the social skills to interact with the class, so he was mostly homeschooled. Somehow he imprinted onto me as a friend who he could trust and talk to, which was a relief to his parents as they entrusted me with taking him out occasionally for excursions. He's grown up now and leading a normal life, thankfully. Not to say that Mizoto's character was written to be on the spectrum in any way, but her being a gloomy introvert would probably put her as a target of teasing or even bullying. Yeah, there's so many interconnected issues there. Like, there's like being an extreme introvert, but also having potentially some sort of inability to communicate as most normal people do. And also that character just being ripe for bullying at school. Also, to add, it is awesome that you were able to be there for that kid. This whole comment definitely got me thinking in a whole new direction. You know, if we were to extrapolate what kind of condition Mizoto has, acknowledging that diagnosing someone is completely outside of my scope or expertise. If anyone has any deeper psychological or scientific insight, please let me know. But if we were to try to extrapolate, Mizoto possibly has like one or a combination of autism spectrum disorder or social anxiety disorder. From the very minimal research that I did, people with ASD experience like significant impairment in social interaction. They have trouble developing relationships and struggle to understand social and emotional cues. That seems to fit Mizoto's experience. People with ASD also tend to become like excessively preoccupied with interests and routines and rituals. You know, something that is helpful to learning a musical instrument. For people who excel at music and also happen to be on the spectrum, there is research to suggest that even if they have limited communication or language skills, they can still process music similarly or even better than neurotypical people. Meanwhile, people with social anxiety disorder tend to have this very intense fear and anxiety about social situations. They either avoid social situations or they just endure them with a lot of anxiety, and they experience feelings of fear that are out of proportion to the threat. So it was also interesting to see that research has found that it's common for children and also adults diagnosed with ASD to also experience social anxiety. So I think perhaps based on how Mizoto told her side of the story, that's maybe where she was coming from, and also the fact that Yuko acted in a way that was like, okay, this is something more than just some shyness or like extreme introversion. This is an actual thing or a disorder that Mizoto has probably been struggling with her whole life. An interesting meta question that came out of these two episodes was the drama depicted here too exaggerated? So as I said, on first watch, I admit I did feel a little bit of that, but on rewatch and reframing Mizoto as potentially having autism spectrum disorder or perhaps some sort of clinical anxiety or depression, that added a meaningful dimension that turned what happened into something beyond just overly melodramatic high school drama. So I do agree with what Rex Arcadia wrote. For these episodes, I normally dislike drama caused by simple misunderstandings or failure to communicate properly, but the events shown here actually resonate with me, partly because I know a few people with depression that perceive themselves as unworthy of love or friendship. Mizoto assumes she was never important enough to Nozomi when the latter quit the band without telling her, and is perhaps too ashamed to seek clarification because she blames herself. Mizoto also assumes Yuko is only kind to her out of pity, which hurts Yuko since she does genuinely value their friendship. Again, because her self-loathing distorts her perception of the world around her, which is really sad. On a meta note, I'm glad they didn't go with the trope of the protagonist coming in and fixing everything. Although Kumiko got herself involved in this drama, she ultimately didn't play an active role in repairing the situation. As much as I love Kumiko, this wasn't really her business, and I think she felt awkward about it too. I actually think Kumiko just feels awkward in just about any situation. But yes, I felt like they were setting up Kumiko too to have this big role to play in fixing the situation by having her like sleuth around and have all of these conversations with the main players. That would have been super tropey if she had just zoomed in and fixed everything, and much less realistic than what ended up happening. And also bringing it back to how Mizoto might very well represent people who have certain neurological differences or mental health struggles. The events spotlighted how social difficulties can really, really deeply impact young people in ways that are like invisible to their neurotypical peers or to people who don't suffer from depression. One more really great comment from Joshua Krumholtz that adds to or deepens that angle of Mizoto potentially having depression. The thing I wanted to get immediately off my chest before diving deep is that one of the common symptoms of depression is a lack of self-care. And you can see that Mizoto's hair tends to be a little on the unkempt side. We also see that Yuko not only assists Mizoto with hygiene and drying her hair at the camp, but seemingly for the entire duration, she doesn't allow Mizoto to be alone all that much. Yuko is skilled and reasonably popular, and yet an aching friend of hers has her full attention. Excellent, just looking at the details to really fill out what is most likely going on, and that also just gave me even more reason to love Yuko. Sorry guys, just quick location change. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes, so I think seen in that light, these episodes serve to really heighten our empathy and bring attention to how these very small slights or oversights by friends can become these traumatic fixations for someone who is neurodivergent or who is struggling with serious mental health issues. And these struggles often play out in silence, completely hidden away from view. And rather than trivialize those types of struggles, the heightened drama portrays a reality of students like Mizoto quite insightfully. Also, more positively, through Yuko's character, Hibike shows us how we can be more educated and I guess more cognizant of these struggles and just be more compassionate. For example, Yuko specifically sought out Kumiko's help when she was going to go off looking for Mizoto, and it was because she knew that Kumiko was someone with whom Mizoto was familiar with and would most likely interact without having an adverse reaction. The fact that Yuko knew to be mindful of how best to approach someone like Mizoto I think it was actually really heartwarming to see. So bottom line is Yuko is the bomb. From Hofetel, yes, Natsuki is best girl of all time, but season 2 is making a serious case for Yuko as the most improved player in the best girl competition. There is no argument from me there. Regarding the drama of season 2, I totally understand the criticisms. It's very true, a lot of the drama could have been avoided if only the characters actually communicated better. But I don't mind it so much because A, these are high school kids. Yep. Something that I have come to realize. Failing to communicate properly is part of growing up. And B, without going into spoilers, I think communication is one of the central themes of season 2. The next task will offer a few more perspectives. I think season 1 tackled more the individual drive to become something special, while this season looks more into the interpersonal relationships involved in that journey. For someone like Mizoto, her connections with others is an extremely important aspect for her to reach her full potential as an individual musician. I don't believe it's very healthy though if Mizoto's sole purpose for playing music is totally dependent on her relationships with others. Again, as someone who plays music, that aspect was totally bizarre to me. That hasn't changed, but we will get into that later. Hopefully her reconciliation with Nozomi and her realization of the value of Yuko's friendship will be the first steps towards growing her individual drive for music. Great comment. Thank you so much. I obviously very took to heart the point about how as high schoolers, their communication skills should be cut some slack. I also think that the isolation and sort of the self-destructive tendencies and the self-doubt, all of that resonates as some very real student-like struggles. And I also really enjoyed your analysis on how this season pivots to focus more on how social connections impact people's individual musical journeys. Mizore's dependency on Nozomi really highlighted how connection to others really needs to be genuine and not carried to these very unhealthy extremes. She is very musically gifted, but she also needs like a supportive community to fully develop those gifts, but just not in that way. And hopefully she realizes that she does have a group around her now, starting with Yuko. Here's another good comment from Pencil Sharp. Mizore said she was explicitly avoiding Nozomi. That's how they didn't talk at all, even though they're in the same grade in the same school. All of the people who knew about the situation were trying to protect Mizore and Nozomi's feelings, except probably Asuka, who didn't really care about her feelings, more cared about winning at Kansai, rather than push for resolution and self-improvement. I think it's neat that adult Niyama-sensei is the first one to notice, apologizing for protecting Mizore's feelings and assuming her limits. Yes, more of Niyama-sensei, please. For Kumiko, it's a bit of a failure to act on her resolve from season 1. She ends up fence-sitting, and instead Yuko comes in to save the day. Yuko is really great here. We get to see the aggressive confrontation and willingness to put herself in harm's way for her friends' work for good this time. Agree. Mizore is one of my favorite characters ever. She expresses so much without speaking. Every time she gives a little nod or a simple response, I feel like I know exactly what she is thinking. I have had this sounding like a robot line given to me as well. First of all, I don't know why anyone would say that to another human being, but yes, you sound like a very cool person. And you also pinpointed exactly why I felt weird watching everything unfold in the last 2 episodes, because nearly everyone involved failed to confront the conflict head on from the start. We already talked about Asuka cutting off Nozomi without explaining herself, Yuko refusing to talk to Natsuki, Nozomi quitting without a word to Mizore. They all acted in ways that they thought were best, but ultimately it turned out to be some sort of like collective conflict avoidance, which made the whole thing bubble over. Their assumptions about each other enabled, I guess, years or months or however long it was of suppressed hurt to simmer. But that's all part of the growing pains of being in high school, right? There are these painful lessons to be learned about the need to speak difficult truths and to have these difficult conversations so that these conflicts and these hurt feelings get smoothed out or talked over until things are okay again. That comment reminded me of like this screenshot of Asuka in the moments just after Mizore had ran off, because she was the other person who was visibly pissed about the whole situation. But Asuka was clearly less concerned about personal feelings being hurt and more worried about how their chances at Kansai just appeared to have been flushed down the drain, despite all of her efforts to prevent that exact scenario. So Asuka, again, she makes her a complex character, but you do have to wince at how little she prioritizes the more human aspects of being in a band or like of having friends. Does she even have really true friends? That is an ongoing question that I'm not really sure of. She clearly has friends who are around her and who would want to get to know her if she let them, and also who may be slightly in love with them, i.e. Kaori. I don't know why Kaori is so stuck on Asuka, knowing that she's like this. But yeah, I don't know. Asuka, again, is someone I'm not sure I would allow get close to me for quite a few reasons either. Maybe just as an interesting acquaintance to sort of analyze every now and then and to observe. When Kumiko was like, what the heck just happened? I was also like, me too, Kumiko, me too. Several times during this last scene where everything was revealed, I was 100% with Kumiko when she asked her questions and responded with shock at the choices made by the people around her. So what really happened? Essentially, it was a problem of communication and a mismatch of expectations between Mizore and Nozomi. Mizore, being the kind of person to always expect the worst, couldn't look Nozomi in the face without experiencing intense anxiety, because to her, Nozomi was her only friend, her world, effectively. And she thought that Nozomi had abandoned her. So why did she think that? As someone who kept to themselves, probably because of a combination of her difficulty with establishing relationships and her fear of social situations and people judging her, and just general trouble with reading social and emotional cues, when someone as bubbly and friendly as Nozomi took the initiative to genuinely befriend her and to spend time with her, it completely turned Mizore's life around. She now had someone with whom she could have fun and be herself and call a friend. And then that mismatch in expectations and the root of their conflict was sown when, I guess, reality hit, the reality that Nozomi has other friends, whereas Mizore only has Nozomi. Was that Nozomi's fault? No, it is absolutely healthy and normal for a teenager to hang out with a lot more than just one friend. Did she say anything to make Mizore feel unwanted? Again, not really. What Nozomi did do, or rather what she didn't do, was that she neglected to inform Mizore that she was quitting band when all that drama was going on last year. As a result, it made Mizore feel like she wasn't important to Nozomi at all. Maybe all of that time that they spent together and the friendship that Mizore thought that she had meant nothing to Nozomi, and that absolutely killed Mizore. Here's the part that killed me. Mizore said the only reason why she continued with band or ensemble was that it was the only thing left connecting her with Nozomi. That is just wild. It's wild to me and just devastatingly tragic, because as someone who plays instruments and loves music, the idea that someone would endure all of the hard work that goes into playing and practicing and rehearsing music just to preserve that faintest, arguably illusory connection to a friend they believe has abandoned them or thinks nothing of them it's just mind-blowing. And I was totally with Kumiko there. It's not something that would ever cross my mind would be possible. It's hard to imagine any other motivating factor for mastering your instrument other than because you love it. That's what makes Mizore's situation so unique. In previous Hibike episodes, each character in their own way has expressed how they genuinely like playing their instruments. Sure, like a lot of kids start out playing an instrument because their parents forced or encouraged them to, but the ones who do stick it out for a long time, at least several years, which most of these kids have, usually they're the ones who discover that despite the sweat, the hand calluses, the nosebleeds, and just the pressure of competition or music exams, that they've come to love the music that they can create. When you love something for its own sake, you're willing to put up with a lot of crap. So those who don't love it usually end up quitting to pursue other interests and other passions that they are genuinely interested in. The rare few who keep going with music out of spite or out of a reason other than because they love it, such as Mizore, who did it out of this desperate desire to keep Nozomi in any way that she could, even though it wasn't really, they are not in a great space mentally. Mizore's reason for continuing playing oboe also fits with someone who potentially is on the spectrum, as we already talked about. Normally, when someone grieves, they might cling to something that they used to share with the person that they lost, but usually then they move on and realize that it doesn't make sense or it's not productive to continue on in this manner. Whereas Mizore, as someone who doesn't perceive things in the way that most people do and who has trouble understanding and regulating intense emotions, it would make sense in her mind that fixating on the oboe is something that she could do to cope and to preserve her connection to Nozomi. It's also why she could persist with this laser focus for years, despite having no intrinsic musical fulfillment, and why she wasn't able to step back and just recognize that it wasn't helping with her grief over losing Nozomi. It's representative potentially of an authentic experience for a high schooler with ASD who has had to go through this quite traumatic experience and whose world has just collapsed because their one friend seems to have just rode off into the sunset without a thought for them. I've said this before, but I am such a fan of how Yuko interacts with Mizore. She is a solid girlfriend who would kill for Mizore. The fact that Mizore was so consumed by her grief over losing Nozomi that she never realized Yuko considers her a genuine friend made Yuko just lose her shit in like a really weird, positive, affirming way. Like, I love you and have always been here for you, and I will always stay by your side, you big dum-dum sort of way. We again saw Mizore's difficulty reading people and their intentions, and her tendency to really expect the worst in social situations. Does that mean that she has a screw loose, as Yuko very passionately said, as she like smooshed Mizore's face in between her hands in this very aggressive act of affection? No, not really. It's just how Mizore is. It's like not her fault. If she is on the autism spectrum as speculated, differences in neurocognitive wiring can make reading these nonverbal signals incredibly difficult. But regardless of a formal diagnosis, everyone has their relative strengths and weaknesses when it comes to interpreting social behaviors and these unspoken social etiquette rules. Mizore just struggles a lot more than most in this area, but she definitely didn't choose to be bad at those particular skills. That girl just needs like a lot of TLC, and I think Yuko is the perfect person to give her that. I also appreciated that Yuko made Mizore realize that she, in fact, didn't continue in band just because of Nozomi. She reminded her that she did enjoy practicing and persevering with everyone else, that she was happy also when their efforts were rewarded by winning their district competition, and that as graduates of Minami in particular, they had even more reason to be happy because they overcame that intense disappointment of losing in middle school and proved that they had the talent and the grit to bounce back from that loss. Man, I really kind of want to go back to all of those episodes where the kids reacted to their wins or just their progress, because I'm pretty sure that we're going to see Yuko always being next to Mizore and just being happy with her. That would be an awesome planting of the seeds before we got to this moment. But yeah, my heart just broke when it dawned on Mizore that Yuko is right. They set up and they escalated that scene in such an emotionally tense way that felt natural, even though Mizore's realization was still done in a super dramatic way and Yuko was literally straddling Mizore the entire time. The fact that Mizore felt bad or guilty for being happy because she felt that the people who had quit the year before, including Nozomi, didn't get that chance for a do-over just goes to show how exhausting it is for Mizore to be constantly worrying about how others will judge her every thought and feeling, and just the dread that comes with thinking that maybe you're doing the wrong thing or feeling the wrong thing because you yourself don't have the capacity to assess and understand what the right thing to say or do or feel is. That is why it is so important for Mizore to have friends like Yuko who understand that she's different and accepts her for who she is and will also tell her straight up what's what. And I loved that deliberate composition of this shot where Yuko literally pulled Mizore into the light, representing just how she helped Mizore realize that it is okay to be happy and celebrate your own achievements, and that she also has people who care about her and who love her for who she is. I feel like we do have to give Nozomi some credit, because once she found out what had been troubling Mizore, she did step up to explain herself and also to clear the air. Actually, throughout this entire episode, I noticed this thing that Nozomi does where if she's like burdened by something or isn't quite sure what to do about a difficult or an awkward situation, there is this moment of hesitancy, but then she really quickly gathers herself and she puts on a brave face, and then she just keeps going and she faces the situation. With Mizore, she straight up asked her if she had done or said anything to hurt her feelings. And she was humble enough to acknowledge that maybe she had done something unconsciously to make Mizoto feel this way, and she was ready and willing to step up and own up to it. Also, she kind of just admitted that she is a bit of a dum-dum with these sorts of things. By the way, I would have loved to be in the room when Asuka cornered Nozomi after Mizoto had fled the scene, and just seeing Asuka with murder in her eyes, demanding Nozomi to just fix things. Like, I don't care what the hell you have to do. Beg or lie, steal and cheat, just fix our oboist so that we can get to Kansai. That is sort of the headcanon that I imagined when Nozomi was like, oh yeah, Asuka told me to give this oboe back to you. Props to Toby R for illuminating that one line for me. Ask you to quit with me is Nozomi making assumptions that Mizoto would follow her if she even just told Mizoto about quitting. She didn't want Mizoto to quit, so she just decided not to bring it up around her. But the assumption Nozomi makes about Mizoto's dependence on her is a whole facet of their relationship that is explored in the Liz and the Bluebird movie, which I plan to definitely watch after we are done with Hibike. So it wasn't that Nozomi didn't consider Mizoto a good or close enough friend to tell her about quitting, but she made that logical leap that if she ever told Mizoto about it, Mizoto would automatically quit with her, either out of solidarity or because they had become such good friends. And given how well Mizoto had taken to the oboe and how she really seemed to enjoy playing it, to Nozomi, it would be wrong to do that to Mizoto. So she made this executive decision to just quit without saying a word to her. This unilateral decision that she made, Nozomi saw as being the most selfless thing she could do for Mizoto. However, even though Nozomi may have had good intentions for making this choice, that doesn't mean that it was the best one, or that it was the right thing to do, or really that it even made sense now that I'm thinking about it again. Because on the one hand, it was weird, right? She knew how much Mizoto depended on her, otherwise she wouldn't have assumed that Mizoto would automatically quit. So she did know that they had a level of friendship there where Mizoto really relied on her, or really saw her opinion or cared about her opinions. However, Nozomi also failed to detect the extent to which Mizoto relied on her. She didn't know Mizoto well enough or perceive the nature of her attachment to know that this sudden lack of communication wouldn't come across well, that Mizoto would sort of create a monster of it in her mind, given how she struggles with interpreting nonverbal signals and just other people's thoughts and emotions. I'm like, even if you put aside Mizoto's potential, autism, or the fact that she really struggles with interpreting social and emotional cues, Nozomi also sent some really mixed signals that would be difficult for a normal person to interpret as well. She's like, oh, if I tell Mizoto about my plans, she's going to automatically quit with me because we're such good friends. But yet we're not good friends enough that she won't take it the wrong way, that I just leave and not speak to her ever again after that. There is such an inherent contradiction in what Nozomi did that I honestly don't blame Mizoto at all for how badly she took it. And that's why I think, and I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, Patty Tuo Hoshi Jane, I think they asked a really good question. Is it really possible that Nozomi would not tell her friends, whom she holds dear, about her momentous decision to quit the club? This is why I still feel torn. I know we said before that Nozomi couldn't have been expected to know how desperately Mizoto relied on their friendship, because Mizoto never really expressed that obsession or preoccupation of hers. Ultimately, the extremeness of Mizoto's reaction reflects her unique sensitivity and her years of coping with social isolation. But on the other hand, it's not completely irrational for a kid to think that a friend's complete silence or a lack of communication for such an important decision that they made means that they have been rejected somehow. So I, again, do not blame Mizoto for being so scared and just not being sure of how to interpret Nozomi's complete silence. And while this scene ended beautifully, it still felt like a knot that was way too easily untied. Nozomi told Mizoru, how amazingly she played at the previous competition, like at Kyoto, and how like she has always been a brilliant player. And then she just handed her back her oboe quite ceremoniously, almost like this act of reconciliation. And then she went on to like tell Mizoru that her playing really lights her soul on fire and that she wants to continue hearing her play, in the future. And then Mizoru gave that like dazzling smile and said, okay, I'll keep playing. Kind of like her soul had just been healed. And then, of course, we already talked about how at the end she goes back to playing with this very warm, rich vibrato and most importantly, with emotion again. So I'm sure Hashimoto will have nothing to say about her playing in future rehearsals. It was a fairy tale ending to this arc and like a very cathartic sort of emotional breakthrough. But I feel so strongly like some underlying issues remain unresolved. For example, Nozomi got off totally scot-free for her misguided decision to keep Mizoru in the dark. And I felt like she was forgiven before she had to do any real reflection on how her behavior impacted someone vulnerable like Mizoru, and just sort of learned how not to make that same mistake in the future. She also didn't really acknowledge that her failure to communicate allowed Mizoru's assumptions about abandonment to really fester. That even if she had anticipated Mizoru would quit the band with her, that really real respect amongst a true friend requires transparency and direct communication over and above assuming that what you're doing is the best for someone else, that you're protecting them. This whole idea of protecting someone without even talking to them and assuming that what you're doing is right is a real flaw in some of these characters, particularly Nozomi. I also don't feel like the problem of Mizoru's very unhealthy dependency was adequately explored. And this is obviously something that couldn't have been resolved in this very short, intense, few-minute interaction. Realistically, it's something that could be struggled with for years. Moving forward, though, Mizoru and friends would have to come up with like a clear game plan to develop her communication skills and in order to prevent another similar breakdown from happening. Otherwise, I think these old negative thought patterns might persist and just resurface again. When Nozomi was like, oh, I want to keep hearing you play oboe, it would be the worst if Mizoru assumed that things are going to go exactly back to how they were before without adjusting her mindset that she really needs to recalibrate, how she sees and relates to Nozomi. So I guess, yeah, Liz and the Bluebird, here we come. Maybe the fact that Mizoru has other friends like Yuko, especially Yuko, will help her readjust her thinking about friends. Also, because Yuko is clearly married to Natsuki, the two of them are like, the undisputed old married couple in Hibike. So if Mizoru has Yuko, she naturally gets Natsuki as part of the package deal. In a perfect world, like I could see the pair of them adopting Mizoru and just allowing her to practice interacting with more than just one person. Their antics and like that group dynamic would be far healthier than the relationship that she had built with Nozomi in her own mind to some extent. Finally, I just have some last bones to pick with Asuka. Her flippant analysis that both Nozomi and Mizoru's actions came down to having unfair personalities was bizarre, and I would venture to say just plain wrong. I could see in some sense that Mizoru placing this unspoken burden on Nozomi as her one and only friend could be interpreted as unfair, but Asuka also doesn't take into account that Mizoru isn't equipped with the skills that most people have to navigate social interactions. It showed just how little empathy Asuka has for Mizoru's nuanced neurological differences and the challenges she has forming healthy attachments given her severe anxiety and or social isolation. Asuka's take on Mizoru keeping Yuko around as insurance was also bullshit. Asuka wasn't in the room when Mizoru broke down and told Yuko that she just thought that she pitied her. Mizoru she saw herself as undeserving of love. Clearly, she had no idea that someone could care so deeply for her, let alone have it in her to keep them around for insurance. So the way that Asuka characterized Mizore's actions as unfair, I felt kind of implied that she thinks Mizore did all of these things with an underlying manipulative intent, whether she meant to or not, when really there are deeper psychological factors and attachment issues at play. And I think Asuka herself was being unfair. As for Nozomi being unfair, Asuka could have meant it in several different ways, neither of which seemed to fit reality. Maybe she meant that Nozomi's obliviousness to how much Mizore relied on her was like carelessly unfair. It's unfair that her more bubbly personality attracts lots of other people and leads to this tendency to be insensitive to how other vulnerable or very sensitive individuals like Mizore can get drawn in and burnt. Which, okay, I guess. But Asuka also didn't seem to acknowledge that Nozomi had no idea that Mizore had elevated their friendship to such an integral part of her life, which meant that she wouldn't have known the impact that suddenly quitting would have on Mizore. Asuka also wasn't there when Nozomi very genuinely apologized. It was, for Nozomi's part, it was more oblivious, like naive optimism and misjudgment in the situation than any sort of malicious intent. Maybe Asuka was referring to Nozomi's very headstrong nature, like she insisted on quitting band even though Asuka gave her reasons to stay. Her insistence then, like on sticking to her principles, was unfair because it rocked the boat and negatively impacted the entire band. Like I could see how that might be considered unfair, but also Nozomi wasn't entirely in the wrong. You know, there are some other much more blameworthy people and the system. To be honest, it really just felt like Asuka was projecting. Maybe she would be the type to keep someone around for insurance, or to like manipulate others into being her friends for some very selfish reasons. We see that she's not above moving people around like chess pieces on a board to accomplish her own goals. I guess what was off-putting about this scene is the way that she so casually dished out these judgments. She is 100% convinced that her take on the situation is right when she's mostly off base. Ultimately, these takes of hers really rely on like a cynical worldview that everyone consciously weaponizes their skills or their character traits or their connections to manipulate other people. And that's just not true. That's maybe Asuka's view of the world and also maybe what she partakes in, but it definitely isn't generalizable to everyone else. I felt the impenetrable mask Asuka is so famous for really started cracking in this moment. For the first time, I weirdly felt pity for her. The way that she reduces people's actions to pure self-interest is just overly simplistic. You know, like everyone is out for themselves, whether they say it out loud or not, or whether they even are conscious of it themselves. It's all very like Ayn Rand. And I think it says more about Asuka's own inclination to cynically reduce people's actions to machinations driven by self-interest rather than appreciate each person's humanity. Like it also reflects like an inner bitterness more than reality or like Nozomi Mizore's true disposition in this case. So I just feel like something must have happened in her childhood to twist her view of the world into assuming that all people are incapable of being motivated by anything else other than self-interest. It can be beneficial to not care, even if it means being a bit of an asshole. Asuka's deliberate distancing from everyone else has generally allowed her to avoid getting caught up in turbulent high school drama. But here, I think we saw it carried to extremes, like this not caring and seeing everything through the lens of self-interest. It can lead to overlooking and dismissing the humanity in these more complex situations. Friendships just become calculated transactions and altruism doesn't exist. You know, this is functionally like a sociopathic worldview, and it blinds Asuka to any genuine heartache or mental health struggles, or even all the positive motivators that people experience on a regular basis. Most significantly, and probably the saddest thing about Asuka, is that her aversion to being emotionally open, because she's so hell-bent on seeing the world through this very cynical lens, is that it stops her from seeking support for her own underlying troubles. The way that she played the youth alone at dawn and just other past shots of her in very deep contemplation hints that she does have some, heavy, darker, deeper thoughts buried inside her. But her self-imposed isolation and her incredibly cynical view of the world means that she will remain lonely despite her outward confidence and her sharp wit. It's also sad because no one person has the correct view of the world. We all have our shortcomings and our inadequacies in how we perceive the world. We need other people to fill in those gaps and to, hit us with doses of reality every now and then. No matter how smart we think we are, other people always have different perspectives that we need to pay attention to and to listen to and to see if, it adds to, and it always does, it adds to our worldview so that we're not always so narrowly focused on interpreting things the way that we think is right. All right, guys, season 2, episode 5. You ready? Here we go in 3, 2, 1, play. Yuka. I'm so glad so many of you agree with me that Yuka has pipped. No, not pipped. She's right there with Natsuki in terms of being best girl. Also, I am aware that season 3 is going to come out in just under a few months. We will see how we go with this. I mean, I'm aiming to finish this before season 3 comes out, but I don't know, guys. Let's pray to the gods. Have they always had English subs there for the lyrics? Okay, so I'm assuming, just before we start this episode, that the Nozomi Mizore arc is done and dusted, at least for this series. I don't know if it's going to crop up again as a problem in the future, but they're probably going to go back to focusing on the competition, right? Is that the entire reason why they made Liz and the Bluebird? To just toss out the untied ends of this very compelling relationship, or uncompelling relationship, depending on how you look at it, because it's still an open question, right? Like, how deep did their friendship actually go? Something doesn't sound quite right. Don't go flat, or I will be at your window with a knife. Oh, Kumiko! Kumiko killing it. Ooh. The expectations, eh? It's good to have expectations to a certain extent. Oh shit, are we gonna? Oh man, please give us the full performance. Niyama. I mean, Hashimoto's cool too, I guess. I hope she gives me sort of a final, little encouraging pep talk. Hey, he wouldn't say that if it wasn't true. Okay. We got a nod from Izore. I don't know. I mean, it still doesn't make up for that weird moment before when he compared Misora to Reina. But that was nice. That was nice. Yeah, let's not forget like Hazuki and Natsuki. The positivity is absolutely blinding. I bet she makes Asuka sick. I bet Asuka's like, how can there be such good and bright people as you? Whoa, look at the fire in Kamika's eyes. Azusa. Oh, the Rika girl. Okay. And that is a long day for the judges. Hmm. What does that mean? Like, she'll be in the zone, so she doesn't want anything to disturb her, throw her off her focus, I guess. Seriously, get married already. Oh, that was Mizoto with Nozomi. Okay. Wow, so they really are just all fine now. Asuka just dwelling in her thoughts alone. Yeah, again, feeling some pity for Asuka. Everyone's got their person, even though they're dead nervous. At least they have someone. Oh, Rika. Those are the blue demons that they were scared of in season one. And now they can't even get gold. Welcome to the lovely sounds of nervous rehearsal. Tacky. I do love his vibe though. It's very helpful for nervous students. She sounds so genuine though. Oh, okay, okay. This is real. That was real. Attica's like, there's no way I'm following up with that. Damn, that was like a full on battle war speech. They will rue the day. Asuka. Man, she has these moments. Parvatian dance. No, don't play for Nozomi. Play for yourself. Okay. No. Wait, what? Where is this coming from? Kids. Oh god. Oh god. Okay, I don't mind. It's Kimmy Ray, but still. Wow. Yep. This is the part where you shit your pants waiting backstage. Oh god. I know, like why is she saying her goodbyes? Okay. The finger. Hey, whatever stirs the team spirit. Ooh, nerves. I'm nervous. Wow, Misoda is ready. Oh, no. No! Oh my god. I'm gonna die if they don't show us. Oh god. Oh, okay, maybe. Okay, so we get Crescent Moon. Okay. Ooh, those trumpets are sharp. It's okay. Come on. The photo is stuck on their music. I mean, they probably know this song off by heart at this point. Beautiful fingerings. Oh man, Mitari with the taped fingers. So relatable. I love that they focus on Shuichi to be like, see that part that he struggled with? He's got it now. I don't play clarinet, but I'm pretty sure they don't Move their shoulders so much. Anyway. Hmm. I guess we're playing for each other now. Hey, beautiful tambourine. It sounds so good. Ah, nice. Those horns are nice. That phrasing. Whoa. Nice punch in the air. Nice. Ooh, nice swell there. Those freaking crazy runs. I don't know what instrument that was. Whatever that is, that's freaking hard to do. Whoa. Okay, trumpets. I don't know, man. Trumpets seem to be a little bit over eager in this performance. Oh. Artistic slow mo shot. I love how they animated that symbol. It's so cool. Solo time. Hmm? Hey, what happened to that nice like accented and then slow crescendo? Come on, Raina. What? What is happening? Why doesn't it? She does not sound as good as she did when we've heard this in her audition. Okay, that was really good. Wait, I I'm so distracted that I can't even enjoy the fact that she's thinking about Kumiko in this moment. Oh man, I don't. Okay, we'll come back to the end because I don't want to talk over the performance too much. Reina was not spot on. I don't know what happened. Ah, Mizore. Mizore was perfect. Hashimoto's gonna be like, yo, Tropico, play like that oboist next time. Also, did Asuka has a solo as well? Nice. Percussion. So good. Hey, shared youth look. Oh, nice. Those tonguings were great. Like, ba-ba-da. Hey, Fleet Trill. God, those damn finger animations are so good. Man, this is intense. I don't know why the trumpets just don't sound as good as they used to. They're like too forward, just like bare ass playing. Nice. Oh, Accelerando. And a fermata, it's just kind of a pause, and then back to the original tempo. That ending was, oh man, that was amazing. That was cool. Yeah, it was good. It was good. I know that I kind of complained a lot, especially about Reina, but hey, that was pretty awesome. Yeah, we gotta watch that performance again, and then we can pick on the little things. That's it. That's what we get. Oh, that's it. Okay. I wasn't even aware that the full 20 or so minutes had passed. Okay, guys, I feel like I'm glad that we got to see the entire performance of Crescent Moon. I was shocked that Reina's solo in particular, because I remember it so clearly in my mind. You know how we went back that one time and we broke down why Reina sounds and was actually played by a professional player? There was none of that nuance, or at least very little of that nuance in the solo that we just listened there, even though it was exactly the same solo that we've heard Reina play in the audition. The most glaring difference was that she didn't phrase or string together long phrases of notes together in the beautiful way that she did previously. It was also, there was not much vibrato going on, and her entrances, her very first note that I remember being so struck by in the audition, because it was very like nuanced. It was like, da, 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 da. Here it was just like, ba, 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 ba. Like it was just this very not nuanced, kind of smash in the face entrance that was not reminiscent of why I was so amazed by Reina's audition in the first place, which is so odd to me. Oh man, am I disappointed? A little bit, but honest, the rest of the performance was great. I just enjoyed watching all of the pieces come together. They focused on Shuichi, the little part that he'd been struggling with and practicing. I loved that shot of both Asuka and Kumiko doing that difficult run side by side and in sync, in perfect sync. I thought that was great. And just of course, all of the little animation touches that Hibike is so renowned for. I feel like brass players would be able to pick on so many more details in that performance. We can go back at the end and watch again to see whether or not I'm hallucinating. But yeah, I think the only real strong criticism I had was the trumpets. The trumpets did not sound like they were holding back when they needed to or entering with the grace that they needed to. It just felt like it was very blary, just too much volume all at once, all the time. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Look, even if you're not musically inclined, I would love to know what you thought about that performance. Did they do enough to win? I think so, but is it because they have plot armor? Who knows? I don't think we're going to see any of the other performances. Maybe we might see, no, actually we won't, because Myojo Technical went before them. So yeah, I don't know. Okay, I realized that they have this one final bit after the end of the credits. So we're going to finish the episode for real now. If you guys want to sync with the subs, here we go in 3, 2, 1, play. polite applause. Wait, notice that there was none of that loud, raucous response from Myojo Technical. Reina's just cool, man. She was like, of course. Oh, no, this is the real bit. Why does everyone look like Nozomi? The red demons. Yay! Hey, why wasn't Yuko sitting next to Mizore? I guess Mizore has Nozomi now. But they're still sitting in different sections. Yep, Asuka got her hands on that big fat trophy. Ain't gonna let anyone put their hands on what belongs to her. uh Yeah, now they're good. Oh my gosh. I love that they ended on that musical theme as well. Da, 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 da. The one that ends on the major key after having been in minor. Remember, cast your mind back all the way back to, I think it was the first or the second reaction that we did, and we did this whole going through the major and minor changes in that theme, and it ended on the major here. So that was awesome. I loved that they circled back to the ongoing discussion about whether competitions are good or bad or not. And they landed on, hey, if you win one, it's good. It's such a real, hard, practical view, recognizing that there are so many schools out there who are so talented, yet there's only 3 spots. 3 schools that could advance to Kansai, and they just managed to pick one. Not surprising in any way, shape, or form, but it was... what's that cliche again? It's really the journey there and not the destination that really mattered in the end. Okay, guys, straight on to episode 6. Not sure what other challenges lie in wait for our very hardworking, very dramatic high schoolers, but we shall see. If you're ready, let's do this in 3, 2, 1, play. I love that Niyama and Hashimoto were there too. Reina was so calm. Did you notice that? I don't know if she's going to be that calm when it comes to nationals, because they are going to be facing the best of the best. Man, it's only higher stakes from now on. The further you go in competition, the more it means to you, and the higher you go, the harder you can fall. But again, that's just competition, say. No one likes losing. It sounds like the most obvious thing to say in the world, but... Whose stories do I want to sort of get more into? I mean, I would love to know how Kumiko and Shuichi were inspired by Mamiko, I'm assuming, to pick up instruments. You know, back in the day, in the golden era, when Mamiko didn't have to please her dad and make the hard decision to choose between study and, music. But I don't know how much more of a Mamiko we're gonna get though. It's full speed ahead with nationals, I'm assuming. Hey, that's a nice switch up in tone. Oh, what? Midori is playing the bass. What a badass. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Suddenly there's compound time. Love it. Man, what? Asuka conducting. Okay, it's a whole new world. What is happening? Is this like an alternate universe? That was awesome. I wish they could play more songs like that. Asuka again getting the speeches instead of Haruka. Nagoya. Hey, what was that? Okay, I forgot. Another story I really want to get down to the bottom to is Asuka. Hey! It's so good. This was the song that what's the club called? The other kids who didn't get into competition. They played this, right? Awesome. Rainy conductor. Maybe more of Taki? Is this the obligatory maid cafe episode? Oh god. That was straight out of a horror film. I don't know how these three ended up such dorks, but they're amazing. Uh, Reina, the only customer, but the only one that matters. Reina's like, no. Oh my goodness, so cute. Hey, she's learning. This is your specialty. Oh, it's the 1,000 layer pancakes. What? Okay, everyone's just happy couples now. Come on, Chuichi. You can do it. Oh, they'll still be around. Oh, Reina, do not murder. Abort, abort. Ugh. She's like ready to get her knives out. Oh. Those soulless eyes. I mean, didn't Reina ask him if he was dating? Uh, hey! Cowdy, seriously, Cowdy is the best. It will do anything for the family. Obviously. Okay, we're back to this, Asuka. Not actually doing any work, just terrorizing the students in the hallway. I mean, why didn't they just put Asuka in the haunted house? Holy shit! Oh my god, I would be freaking yeah, I'd be freaking scared. Why is he so huffy and puffy? It's repressed feelings. He's a nice boy. What a place to have that conversation. She was like, Shuichi getting a bit too close. Okay, now's the time. every time Kamiga's like, what? Who are you talking about? Oh, that guy. Oh my god. Great. Ah, soft look. Yeah, it's like sort of riding the high of having won, but then getting ready for that bigger mountain to climb. Back to calculus. Oh. Ooh. Oh man. Ah, why is Mamika's story so real? It's like she gave up music to focus on study to get into university, and now it's almost like she's giving that up. Like her sacrifice was for nothing. At least that's what her parents or her dad is going to say. But hey, sunk costs, right? If you're really not enjoying what you're doing, it doesn't matter. You just, as long as you do what's right for you the next day or now. Mm. Oh man, I mean, okay, that was more mild than I was expecting. So Asian. It's like, don't tell anyone that, there's someone in the family who isn't studying because that's a crime. No. Bye, Kumiko. uh, is he buying like flowers for his wife? Did his wife used to work there, or his wife loved the flowers from there? I could totally imagine Chucky as being the scruffy high schooler, scruffy, awkward high schooler, but with a certain charm about him. What did those flowers mean? I know nothing about flowers. Oh no. Kimiko just avoiding any awkward situation must get away. But why does he just have a towel randomly in his car? Hmm. Damn, old school manual car. Are you gonna do it, Kumiko? Ugh. Okay, so he knows that Hashimoto spilled the beans. Okay, at least he apologized. He's so nice. You know, 5 years, it may seem like a long time, but it's really not for that sort of loss. They reached nationals, but did they win it? That's why. That's why he's like, I'm gonna win gold from my wife. Yep. Hey. Hmm. They they did such a good job of making him appear really soft, you know, like a quiet sort of strength. Rehearsals have 5. These kids are crazy. Yay, we get more Misore. Right, with a ghost. Yeah, I don't know. Everything that uh Misora does now seems to revolve around Nozomi again. But at least she's like got this groove. Like she seems to be interacting more. And she's also enjoying her music for what it is, so I guess that's good. Mm. Mm. Ah, Reina. Ooh, the flowers. Mm. Such an innocent thought. Who's coming for Asuka? What? Okay, let me just check that there's nothing at the end of this credits. Nope. Ooh, it looks like Asuka's mother. I don't know if Asuka's mother works at the school too. It just seemed like she was getting her shoes from, I don't know, somewhere. Interesting. Maybe Asuka, as opposed to Mamiko, whose dad was like, study comes before music. Maybe Asuka's mom or whoever that was, older sister? No, definitely parent feel. Maybe Asuka's relation expects too much from her and is like, you need to be the best of the best in music. And if you're not the best, why bother doing it? So that sort of pressure can also twist your mind a bit and do some terrible things with your outlook on life. A couple of big reveals. So at the start I was like, okay, whose stories do we need to know more about? Mamiko, which we got more of. Taki, we definitely got more on there. And also, I guess, Shuichi or who was it? I don't remember. Anyway, Taki Sensei, yeah, I mean, nothing new there, but it was just feeling his pain and the way that he has endured it with such grace. I think that makes Taki Sensei a real admirable character. He's not bitter about it. Or I'm sure there was a period of time right after his wife's death where everything just lost its color and he was sunk into a deep depression. I don't know how you wouldn't be, but he seems to have found this drive now to take the kids to nationals and win it because of this unfinished promise that he had made to his wife while she was still alive but sick. So that makes all the sense in the world, how driven he is. But he's also not pushing the kids too unreasonably and harshly, even though it would mean the world to him for them to win nationals, because it would mean that he was able to keep his promise. He's still not using the kids as a means to an end. He's still very much about their development and their enjoyment in playing music and in competitions. And he's not going to be, toss the conductor baton at anyone if they happen to stuff up. It's still all about making sure that students themselves enjoy what they're doing. So that's really cool of him. In terms of Mamiko, yeah, the fact that she is thinking about quitting university and just that it's really obvious how much younger Kumiko is, because she's very black and white still about how you perceive these complications in life that crop up. Kumiko is like, well, you were yelling at me all the time about how I should focus on study. Like, what's the point of playing music if you're not going to be a musician later on or use that experience somehow for your career? And now she sees her older sister, quote unquote, giving up. She's like, well, why were you yelling at me all those times for? Why are you quitting so easily? Didn't you go to school or to study to university so that you could get a better job? The truth is, Mamiko probably didn't go to university to get a good job. Or she did, but it wasn't really her own idea. It was more she was pressured into it, or by parents, but also I assume just societal pressure. So I didn't say that properly. Societal pressure. This idea, especially being the oldest, that responsibility of being the first to go to university and doing well, that tends to fall on the eldest in Asian cultures. I am the youngest in my family, so I don't relate to that kind of pressure. My older sister definitely bore the brunt of having to do well and make the family proud and get a proper job, Yeah, it was interesting that things aren't as black and white as Kumiko sees them or wants them to be. Mamiko now deciding to make the choice to drop a university course. It makes sense if she really, really isn't enjoying what she's studying. There's no point in persisting with something that is only going to make you unhappy in the long term. Some people feel the pressure to just keep going with something that they hate because they're like, I've already devoted so much time and sacrificed so much to pursue this career path. I can't give up now. But who's to say that that is the right choice? Maybe sometimes you don't know what you want yet, but you know that this isn't what you want. And so you just need to take that time, that space to figure out what it is that you want from life and then go from there instead of just wallowing and persisting in something that is going to make you hate life for the next 50 years. I wanted to go back to episode 5 because the thing that stuck out in my mind at this moment was when just before they got onto the stage and they were having these little pep talks and stuff. And Mizore said to Nozomi, I'm going to play this for you, which of course harks back to when, when Nozomi told Mizore that she wants to keep hearing Mizore play the oboe. And I know that it's a wonderful sentiment that, they're finally reconciled and Mizore is once again playing with emotion because she has this relationship back with Nozomi now. But also a big part of me is like, I don't know if that's going to be a healthy continuation of their relationship. It seems like Mizore still has a bit of work to do in terms of realizing that she plays the oboe like what Yuko said. She enjoys playing the oboe for its own sake, not just because Nozomi was there and because it means a lot to her relationship with Nozomi. Also, the way that Kumiko and Reina, they were watching that interaction, right, I think. And then Kumiko or Reina turns to Kumiko and is like, okay, I'll play for you. I don't know if they were joking. I don't know if they were just spoofing off the interaction between Mizore and Nozomi. But I think it was a bad booga booga, bad omen. Because when you play for someone and only solely for the purpose of pleasing someone else, I don't think it's really a healthy sort of attitude to go about playing an instrument. And clearly it didn't work out well for Reina because her solo was just it wasn't as good as her audition, and there was just something totally off about it. So there you go. That's the big lesson from these 2 episodes, is if you're playing an instrument, make sure that you are doing it because you yourself enjoy it, not because you want to please someone else or because you want to play the instrument as a way to hold on to someone. If I wanted to put a positive spin on it, I get the idea of playing for someone. I get that, someone can be an inspiration for you to do something, and that's okay. It's just more how it can become too much. You can rely too much on someone to be your driver or your motivation, because you're never guaranteed that that person is always going to be there. You need something more than just, because of this person, I'm going to play. You need to either pair it with something that's more self-affirming. I am playing because this person really inspired me to play. And also I figured out that I myself enjoy playing this instrument. Yeah, so there you go. There is my rant about my uneasiness about that little exchange. I think we'll call it a day there, guys. Thank you so much for watching with me again. I look forward to reading your thoughts, seeing what else it is about these 2 episodes that you picked up on that I didn't, because there's always so much stuff that I learned from reading through the comments. And again, have a great week, and actually Happy New Year. I'm pretty sure the next TPK video is going to be after the new year. I hope you guys are having a good rest over the holidays, and I will see you back again next time for more HBK. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon.